Special meeting of the Ohio Valley Sanitary District order. Would you call the roll, please?
Director Martinson.
Here.
Director Kintosh.
Here.
Director Berg.
Here.
Director Quillisi.
Here.
Director Ulrich.
Here.
And Chair Stone.
Here.
And then Mr. Curtis is not present in the boardroom, and it does not look like he is yet on remotely. So we'll see if he is up.
Okay, so that's our 2449. We'll go ahead and continue and catch up. Shows up.
You do.
We'll ride to the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay, and this being a special meeting, there's no amendments to the agenda or additions. We'll move on to item 5. Any public concerns?
None received.
Public with any concerns? With that, we'll move on to item 6, CPS HR Consulting, General Manager, Interim Recruitment Kickoff Presentation.
I'll just segue in. This is Pam Derby, our project manager with CPS HR Consulting. At your April board meeting, you awarded CPS HR Consulting both the interim general manager and permanent general manager recruitment contracts. Those have been executed, and this is now our project kickoff, which we are doing as a full board, just so everybody's aware of what the sort of path forward looks like. Can meet our project manager, ask any questions. And then you'll have the opportunity to break out into your subcommittee that you've designated, which is, I believe, Ulrich, Stone, and Quillisi. No, Berg, Stone, and Ulrich, correct? So Quillisi, Stone, and Berg. And then, sorry, we have several subcommittees right now. And then to make any decision and then bring any final motion for full approval to the board as you see fit. So I'm going to turn it over to Pam to sort of go over what it's going to look like going forward for you all. And without further ado.
Thank you so much, Allison. Well, good afternoon. I'm Pam Derby. I am your project manager. I also am the manager of the executive recruitment function at CPS HR. Surprisingly, I'm in year 21 there. So I have done many sanitary district recruitments. I'm just finishing up Iron House, actually. And so they're very happy with their results. We had about 40 applicants, which was good for they're a smaller district, a little more remote. And so you have two different pieces of this. One is the interim GM, and then the other is the permanent process. And so with my agenda today, the first thing I wanted to talk about is reviewing the interim GM work plan and schedule, and discussing the timing of the permanent GM recruitment project, discussing the permanent GM recruitment process as well, the GM salary for the interim, for the placement, talk about those things, and then breaking off with the subcommittee. I do believe that we want to hear from the full board about the ideal candidate attributes that you're looking for, both in the interim and the permanent. Oftentimes, those are two different things that you're not necessarily, you're looking for someone probably retired or much more experienced for the interim role, somebody who's probably sat in the seat, which would be the common way to go, typical way to go. In the permanent position, maybe somebody who it's their next step. So the first thing I would like to talk about is if you could bring up the
document.
I'm sorry.
That one?
Oh, there.
Yeah.
So, but if the work plan schedule. So we're having our kickoff meeting today. So meeting with the board, staff, talk about the recruitment plan. One of the things we need to talk about on the interim process, so typically we would just do a flyer rather than our, full-blown, beautiful recruitment brochure that I'm sure many of you have seen. We typically would do a 2-page flyer, usually in-house, talking about what you're looking for, the parameters, the salary, etc. Usually for an interim placement, we only do those for a couple of weeks. My question would be, though, that CASA is coming, I know CASA is coming up the end of July. And so if that is something, someplace where you would like to be talking about this to possibly terms there, then we might want to run this for longer than we typically would. So what I'm proposing, if that's the case, is that we would get you the flyer next week. I would assume that probably the subcommittee would take a look at it. Allison would look at it rather than it circulating through the full board. We would provide, the staff would give us their, and subcommittee would give us their changes the middle of the week. I know we have the holiday next week, and so people may be gone. This may be overzealous possibly, but I know that Allison is looking forward to not having quite so many things on her plate. And then finalizing that text and the flyer at the end of next week. We would then, if you want to advertise it, talking to people about it at CASA, then we would advertise it from the 8th of July through August 2nd, because CASA is that last week. We would plan to have it on our website, the district's website, obviously with CASA, CSDA, Capital Morning Report. I think these positions are really important to advertise to state employees. There are people, throughout the state at Regional Water Board and things who also have done, oftentimes have done sanitary district work, and LinkedIn. We would then also send it to our list of water people in California. We probably, for the interim, we really are going to focus more in California than we would outside of the state, whereas with the permanent, it would be a national process. But for the interims, you're looking for someone who hopefully is maybe in the area, not having to pay, hotel fees and such travel. And so we would be focusing on following up with those individuals here. The reality is that we know many people, retirees and things that do this type of work, that I'll be reaching out to personally as it is to see if they're interested. So we know a whole list of people that might have a desire to come in and do this and do it on, regular basis. So we would be doing that through the 2nd. We would be doing screening interviews with those candidates on an ongoing basis as they applied. So I talked to them about all the things about the permanent, although the questions are a bit different because being an interim is different than being the permanent. And you want to talk to them about, hey, is your plan, do you think you can come in and change things? How do you approach those things? How do you work with the board? Because it is a different role than being the permanent. On the 5th, so if this closed on the 2nd, if that's the way we go, I would send the subcommittee a report on electronically, if that's okay, on the 5th, that would have the resumes of those candidates that we feel that you should interview. That next week, the week of the 12th, typically we've been doing these virtually, but if you wanted, we can do them in person, but oftentimes this first round we've been doing virtually. The subcommittee may interview, 3 to 5 candidates or so. Here is the other thing I'm not sure is whether the subcommittee is going to pick the interim or if you would then like to, as with the permanent process, usually the full board would interview those final, 2 or 3 final candidates. And so I've set that for the week of the 19th. So I'm just a little bit of feedback about how everyone's feeling about this. We can, as I mentioned, we can do this quicker. This can be more expedient. But I've set this time frame in case you want this advertised at CASA.
Bert,
Pam, is all the selection activities referring to the interim?
This is just referring to the interim because I want to talk to you about with the permanent. One of the things to discuss is I know you know, there are elections coming up and it could change. I believe 4 of you are up for election, which could change and oftentimes oftentimes you're running unopposed in these small districts. So the reality is it may not make a difference and we can start the permanent right away. But if you thought that there could be a change in the board that would change things so that the candidates would feel better about being able to at least interview with new board members if it was going to change, especially if it was going to change the majority of them.
Also, the selection activities, do you see those happening virtually?
So the first round of the subcommittee, I see those happening virtually and then with the board in person. However, we can do them all in person.
Are we using like Microsoft Teams or?
We typically use Zoom because it works much better for these things. Teams, well, we use Teams internally at CPS. We do not find functionality to work as well as Zoom does. However, again, you know, sometimes at Iron House, we did everything in person.
These meetings comply with, do we have to notice them? And
Anything with the full board, you'll have to notice them. Anything as a subcommittee, because it's not a standing committee, there are no Brown Act requirements.
It's ad hoc, so it, you know.
I have a question too.
Director
I
Martins.
wasn't part of all this, but why are we bothering with an interim? Why aren't we just going directly to a permanent? The way this is scheduling out, we won't have anybody permanent till December or January. We're not even putting out advertisements for a permanent. Well, it looks like August.
Well,
We've had this position open since April. Why are we waiting 8 months basically to start advertising for a permanent slot? What's the purpose of the interim? It seems to me it would be, the assumption is you can't find anybody right away, so you get somebody just in the short term until they can show up. But meanwhile, we're not even advertising for a full-time person who may be able to show up tomorrow for all we know. So I don't understand what we're doing, to be perfectly blunt. It just seems silly to me. And we're worried about the election, but new officers don't take place till the end of November. I would have hoped we would have had somebody on board by the 1st of August rather than the 1st of 2025. It just, I don't understand why we're doing it this way. Well, there's my usual rant.
well, at this point,
I mean, this is our decision, not yours. So we need to understand from our board, why are we doing this? Why are we taking our sweet time to even advertise for a full-time position? One that we've known we needed since early April. I don't understand what the committee was thinking when we went this route. I know what you're doing. And that's your job to do that. Doesn't bother me. You're doing why are we doing this? That's the bigger question.
I would say it's because that's the way we've done it in the past. It's always worked very well.
Why do you need an interim person if you just go out and get a permanent one and they're available next week?
I can think to a little bit of the process is obviously as a public agency, you have to create and accept a job description, which you may choose to change it from the prior one. You have to formally set the salary in which you're going to recruit on. All of those have to be in a public setting before you can go out and then recruit.
When have we done that?
Well, you need to work with your consultant to do that, to know essentially what it is that the market is going to respond to.
We knew the job we needed in April. It's the end of June. We still haven't done that?
You went through your process of selecting a consultant, putting out your request for proposals. I mean, it has to be, all of those have to be done in an open forum. They have to be equally competitive as a public agency in order to select a
I
consultant.
understand all that,
Our
but
procurement policy does not allow us to just go and pick somebody for such things. Essentially, you want to make sure you're getting competitive price, that they're qualified to do that sort of work. And so you've gone through that process, and yes, it takes time, and you only meet once a month. And so we could have had a series of special meetings, but there was a lot of other stuff going on concurrently to this.
I understand all that. It's the end of June. We haven't done any of that other than picking a consultant. So I just, why are we slow playing this? I get it.
Dr. Kintosh?
I'd like to throw in my 2 cents. I look at having an interim general manager as kind of like insurance. You think of some of the emergencies we've been through in the past couple of years with the storms and the washing out and Woodham Road, other things. You never know. I mean, we have a huge responsibility to keep delivering services to the community. We can't foresee what's going to happen in the next 6 months. And I'm also very aware of how difficult it is to get people to move here. If anybody, my wife was amazed at some little house in 1,000 square foot house sold for $1.2 million. It may not be as easy to get somebody to make a commitment to move from somewhere else in California to get here. So it could take us a lot longer than we expect to get the right person. So we negotiate with somebody, they decide at the last minute they don't want it, we have to negotiate with somebody else. So I just look at it, and I liked it when she said she has a list of people ready to call. And it may be we can get an interim relatively quickly here. And if we,
To me, that's a grand assumption. You can get an interim any quicker than you can a full-time.
it's just,
I just don't understand again why we're slow playing this. I'm hearing your reasons. I think it's nonsense, but that's just me. I don't.
Went through this with the city manager of Ojai.
What's that?
We just went through this with the city manager.
you're full of
Oh,
the best example.
Well, we got an interim
What are you laughing?
who was the adult in the room. Very much welcomed by the
But it
population.
seems to me if you wanted to have a city manager, you'd start out with trying to hire a city manager. As a backup, try to hire an interim rather than starting with an interim that you may or may not ever get and deciding in September, we'll finally go out to look for a full-time guy. We won't have interviews done and any of that until December. We don't usually have meetings in December consistently. So now you're into January or February before a guy even shows up. And then he's going to want a month to get moved and all that. So you're talking about March or April with the timing we have now. And I don't get why we're slow playing it. I don't understand. And maybe it's the qualification. Maybe I don't understand the qualification. I know a number of people that could do Jeff jobs very easily, but I don't know what requirements he had as, part of a sanitary district that a guy operating an oil field wouldn't have. But as far as people and process, that's a no-brainer for a lot of these guys. But anyway, I don't understand I'll shut up. You guys made your decision. I just think and you're doing a fine job. I'm not fussing at you. I just find this astonishing, to be quite honest.
Ben?
I'm done.
Because I heard what you had to say. I heard it several times. From my perspective, I'm going to make a proposal here that's a little bit outside, certainly the box that we've been working with and the time frame that we've been working with and the goals that we were working with, because this kind of occurred to me. I'm a little slow in the uptake sometimes, and this just occurred to me a couple weeks ago. And that is, and partly that has to do with my observation of how things have been going with the city of Ojai's city manager issues, as well as the previous city manager that was a very good city manager. Unfortunately, and we have a sort of a parallel situation. And that good city manager, despite being asked about it for over a year that I'm aware of, there was no succession plan. In other words, there was nobody right there that had been groomed, that had been experienced in the unique machinations of the city of Ojai. And there's an analogy to the unique machinations of this agency. And we sort of had the same situation. And maybe I wasn't aware of if Jeff had a succession plan, but we're here about all this stuff partly because he didn't, or at least one that we're following or not following. So I'm going to propose something, and meaning no disrespect for all of the efforts that you've put into to date, but I would submit from my perspective, and once again, this is just my perspective, that because we are looking at what I characterize as the trough of public agency managers. And there's some really great folks there. And from my experience, there's some not really great folks there, but they're still in the trough, and they get surfaced. And to me, I'm a little concerned about that happening, notwithstanding the good offices. So I guess I'll cut to the chase. From my perspective, we already have someone that's capable of performing. Doesn't require a PE to be the GM. Requires someone who knows the organization and how to operate it. A PE can be the assistant, and a PE who doesn't have a huge wealth of experience is a little bit easier to come by than someone who has headed an agency. So from my perspective, I would submit that we've been doing pretty well here with Allison and Bradshaw. And I think even in the end, as the question was raised at a previous board meeting, what happens if there's an emergency, a cataclysmic emergency? Well, they're going to handle it, and then they're going to look for direction from the board, and that's as it should be anyway. So having said that, my vote and would facilitate this entire process by cutting it down by 65 or 70% would be to consider Allison as GM and hiring a PE, a young PE, and that would facilitate the getting somebody to move here a little easier. And then have them groomed and experience the as a consequence of being part of the agency without having someone, and I don't care how much experience they have, they're going to have to step into a culture that they're not familiar with otherwise. To me, that also is hugely saving as far as time and money. Because hiring an assistant is going to be a lot less than hiring an interim and a permanent. And again, I don't think that's would be too much of a stretch for Allison to step into. Allison, would it be?
Well,
I should have asked you first before I put you on the spot here, but you know what the heck, this is a free-ranging conversation.
gosh, yeah, this is a tough one. I am both feet in on the interim role, and I'm happy to continue to do it, until such time a permanent is found. I'm not sure that I would consider the permanent role.
I just love question marks.
I'm sorry. It's, for me, work-life balance is incredibly important to me. And I think the structure of being an at-will employee, I think is maybe not, there's a little uncertainty there. I think in a new role at this point in my career, maybe if it was later in my career, I would feel a little bit better about it. If you would like me to consider it, I I definitely will consider it. It wasn't something that I was going to actively apply for, to be perfectly honest. But I am 100%, willing and capable to, until such time, it naturally falls into place to continue to do the interim. I do agree that it's working really, really well. I think all of us with our specific subject matter expertise have done really, really well, moving things forward for the good of the district, trying to do business as usual as much as possible. It's been an incredible learning opportunity getting to do things that normally I would either collaborate with Jeff on or only do portions of it. So I 100% appreciate that opportunity, and will continue to do everything that I can. I just not 100% certain that at this particular juncture in my career that this would be necessarily. I envisioned this as being my natural next step. But if you would like me to consider it and discuss it, I'd be happy to do that.
See, I think that idea is interesting, but not for the reason it seems to me what the board did is put Allison and Bradshaw in the position of interim manager. There's no reason to be out hiring another interim manager. So we have an interim manager. What we should be doing is focusing on getting whatever documents need to be prepared, whatever notices need to be given to our public and to the potential employee base, and get that done, get it started, get on with it. And I think another thing about having Allison do it, if we were to put together a list of qualifications required, minimum qualifications for the general management position, and she submitted her application, she would not be considered. And that's just the reality, even though she's doing a great job here. So if we're going to put that level of experience necessary on our general manager position, we're going to have 1,000 more candidates out there.
But since you jumped in without the, I'd like to respond to that, if I may.
Right.
Are you absolutely familiar with requirements?
No, I'm not.
Well, then don't make presumptions about what they are and whether somebody can meet them or not.
I don't think I
That's
can.
particularly prudent at this particular point. Okay,
Do you
it's an
think
idea.
she-
It's, I believe what it comes down to is ultimately the board votes on what those requirements are.
Exactly.
Okay, and the past may be a good measure, but that doesn't preclude thinking outside the box or differently. The reality of the situation is, while there are some benefits to how things are done traditionally or historically, that does not always, since circumstances change quickly, that is not, to me, an absolute ironclad guideline. Especially considering you were already bringing up, I got two issues. One is already bringing up folks from the oil patch, and two, that we're putting out search parameters for folks that are in the water business. This, once again, it's a very unique agency, and someone who's been in the water business might not necessarily be the best fit, although they meet all of the qualifications and criteria that whatever those are. So, there's several ways of looking at this, and I think all I'm suggesting is a different one.
Director Byrd?
We do have a contract with CPS HR Consulting, and I think that we should ask Pam what's been her experience, timing, and the amount of time that it takes to get a good candidate for general manager. Is it 5-6 months? Is that?
It's typically 4 months is the average. The reality is that any coastal city is expensive. And so that is definitely something that we deal with in California, period, for the most part. And so that can exacerbate things. But the reality is that, I have a really crack team of sourcers, and we're pretty much 4 months for a board appointed position. It can be the reality is that you only need 1 month. And so the employment. You can do everything else in closed session. You can do it in special meetings with your interviews, et cetera. The one thing you must do at a regularly scheduled meeting is approve the employment agreement. And that's just what the Brown Act says, and it has to be done in public. And so sometimes that can exacerbate, you can't have a special meeting to do that. And so, but we like to try and do the schedule so that it works, so that, you can have that appointment. You had your last set of interviews, and within 3 weeks or so, you're having that next meeting. We've been able to negotiate, and you can approve the employment agreement.
Selection of the interim manager. Is this something that's part of the normal process that sanitary districts follow, or is it unusual?
No, it's not unusual. Typically what I do, we have a contract, although I am happy to do the interim piece pro bono, basically. I mean, if what I have in, what we have contracted for is to actually do advertisements and things like that. Oftentimes I just go to my list of individuals and start calling people that I know and, saying, we're looking for an interim in Ojai, and maybe place one ad on, CASA, and then get somebody in front of, get 3 or 4 people in front of the selection committee right away. So that you can do that in a 2 to 3 week period to get an interim on board. And, we can cut the costs way down from that if you decide to go with the interim. And basically, we're doing that in tandem with doing the permanent search. So we did do an interim in Iron House. That's the most recent. It took us, 2 or 3 weeks to find candidates for them. They put the interim in place. That was probably first part of April, end of April, and they just were about to approve an employment agreement for the permanent candidate. So the interim is only going to be in place for about 2 to 3 months.
In touch.
I like the idea that she's presenting here, and that is we pursue an abbreviated recruitment for the interim manager. And we just have her call a couple folks on her list. We don't need to do the big, huge advertising spread and the flyer. She calls some people on our list. And the nice thing is if she calls her list and we find somebody, then it gives us an opportunity to see if that's what we want to pursue. And if there's nobody on our list that really is being responsive or meets the qualifications, then we have a very good team working right now. We say, okay, at that point, we're not going to leave the present team in place. So it gives us the most flexibility.
Present team being
Allison and Bradshaw. Because that's working out pretty well from what I hear. And so we have an abbreviated recruitment, try to find somebody in just a few weeks. And if we find somebody, that's great. We can consider that. And if we don't find them, we'll just say, okay, we haven't found anybody. We're going to pursue this interim recruitment anymore. Put it aside and focus on the main recruitment. Does that make any sense?
I was just gonna ask Pam, I know that typically the interim manager positions are retired managers from other places, but have you seen times when it's worked out that the interim actually comes in and then steps in as the permanent manager?
Well, usually that's a decision of the board, and typically we don't suggest, first of all, people who would want to step in are, it's going to be people who are willing to take the interim or people who are unemployed. They're not going to leave a position thinking that they may get it to be the interim. And so, that is why it's usually retired annuitants. And if you're going to go ahead and do the permanent role, Allison isn't necessarily interested. It can have a dampening effect on your outreach and recruitment if people think that there's an interim that is part of the recruitment, that they're going to be an applicant for the job, because people, this takes a lot of effort on their part.
Yeah.
It's, having just done the city manager search, it's the same thing that, it takes, these are busy people. And so putting their application together and then going through the interviews and, you know, traveling here if necessary takes time. And so I do think that we, you know, with all of the contacts I have in Ventura County and in, you know, we've just done Simi Valley City Manager, but, you know, I've done Visera Retirement Administrator a couple of times, so I know everyone on that board who they know people. And I'm sure that, you know, many of them know people who have been in some of the districts, so. But, yeah.
Director Cole says question, then we'll come to you.
You talked about, you know, people, good sourcers. Are the lists of folks that you would be reaching out to for the interim job, is that a separate list from ones for the permanent job? No mix
They're
there.
typically not, no, they're typically not mixed because the people I'm calling are retirees who are, this is what they do. They come in and they do interim jobs. They're well equipped to handle that. And so those are the people that I'm reaching out to. And so through all our connections at CASA and CSDA and again, just also having many contacts around Ventura County.
And as retired annuitants, there's a limit on how much they can work.
Correct. So, and usually if they haven't had another issue, we're starting the new fiscal year, starting July 1. So all of them will have another 960 hours if they're PERS. Now, if they are retired, say they're retired from LAD, DPW, DWP, I always get the W and the P mixed up. But if, you know, if they're from Lacera or LACRA, there's no issue with their hours because they're not PERS employees.
Director Martinson?
So in terms of the list of people you were going to call, the practical reality is when we finalize stuff we need to do, you're going to call a list of people for the permanent.
Well, yes, but it's a much bigger list. I mean, initially it's going across the country and they're different sets of people.
I'm just, again, wondering why we haven't done that already. So the following question to that is our subcommittee around this personnel issue, do they know and have everything they need to know, give to you so that you can start with the permanent process? Are you still waiting for salary? You're still waiting for, so have you given them a list of the things that you need to have before you can start that search?
We just finalized the contract with a matter of like last week. So this is our actual.
So
I mean, it takes me about a day to turn on things.
Would our committee have the list of things they need to have to you before you can start the permanent process?
Well, the things I would need by the end of the week to be able to actually start next week.
So you could start as early as next week if you had what you needed.
Week after it, we would probably be able to post week after next.
So again, to our committee,
I'm ready.
Who's ready?
Whenever. I can meet tomorrow. I can meet Friday.
You're
I can
ready.
meet Monday. I can meet Tuesday. I can meet Wednesday. I
So
can
it's,
meet all the day.
so
I have no problem.
the board is,
We've got to go through this process and that's what we're doing now.
so the board is capable of coming up with whatever she needs. So that she could start the permanent process certainly within a month.
Mhm.
If the board were so inclined to proceed at that pace.
I think it's July 4th, so it's right.
Yeah, I know. That's why I gave her a month. Anyway, I've been rather vocal. So I will now just shut up entirely and let you guys sort it out.
Is today the day we pick a salary range?
So we can talk about salary today, absolutely. I was prepared, so for the interim, because you're a PERS agency, the most they can make is whatever the last GM was making, and you pay it as an hourly range. So that's to anybody, even if they are not retired out of the PERS system. PERS says the most you can pay someone is that hourly range. Now you can pay for, you can't pay any types of benefits for things, but you can pay for some mileage. You could pay for hotel nights, which are kind of typical things oftentimes that you may have to do. But usually the salary is just set at the hourly wage that.
Sounds like it's already been.
So for the interim piece, now for the salary range, I would, we've just finished your class and comp study. So really, my class and comp team, I'm sure, has what they.
Yeah, our GM wasn't part of that class and comp study.
Both agencies and their salaries.
But that's, I would do that this week and go and look. I haven't had time. I've been trying to do the negotiations with Iron House and get Fresno Council of Governments off. And so I've been doing their salary surveys at the moment. And we just signed this last week. So, but this week I and my team could focus on putting together a quick market study for the position here so that we would have that.
I think it might be helpful. Can you answer the question, because this may come up at a later date? Are typically the interim folks, because you mentioned hotel stays, et cetera, are they generally willing to work full-time? Or is it usually like a part-time, or is it could be either or?
Well, so typically, if they're not here, if they're having to travel, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Usually they'd be here 2 to 3 days a week and then work virtually. Usually they're willing to work full-time. It's just that, if they're coming in from, say, the Valley or someplace, they may be here for on-site 2 to 3 days and then virtual a couple of days, but obviously be available to the board at any time. Is everyone in the office in?
Yes, we're
on-site?
100% on site.
100%. And the reality is there could be people here that it's just that can come do the job that are not far away, and you wouldn't have to worry about that they'd be willing to be here. But certainly if they're at the 960 situation, they may say, well, I want to work 3/4 time.
Sure. I think that's helpful for them to know, because our staff relies quite a bit on in-person consultation with our general manager, so.
Well, I'll just throw my 2 cents out with. I think it's important that we do get an interim in here, just to take some of the stress and the higher responsibilities off of Allison and Bradshaw, because they do have full plate plus right now. And that's not accounting for anything that might come up at a later time. So I'm in favor of the interim. And if the board wishes to speed the process up and we have to meet more to do what we need to do, I certainly don't have anything with that. Just kind of what you guys think you would like to have.
Can you run 2 at a time? On both searches at the same time.
That's what would satisfy, I think it's a good idea too, if it's doable. I don't know if that's within their normal procedure.
You're really catching me at a great time. I just closed, I want to say 5 recruitments in the last 3 weeks, and I'm only going to do 12 to 14 recruitments for this fiscal year. So I can do my succession things.
Well, they're also 2 different pools, really.
They're 2 different pools. The
Oh.
reality is they are 2 different pools. And I have a whole network of people, as I said, that I'll just start texting and say, hey, this is what's happening. Do you know somebody who's interested? Would you have an interest? And it's really all just about networking and letting people know. The other thing is, CSDA is having their summit right now. Our senior leader is there. I would, text her and say, hey, talk to people, retirees up there to see if anybody's interested.
Director Burton?
Yeah, so if we put the permanent manager on a faster track, the information that you need from us is salary range. What else?
So I would like to hear from, and we can have, typically we will have an individual conversation with each of you. We can do those on the phone to talk about what you're all looking for. We're all here today, and so maybe we could just go around the table. But sometimes you'd like to have those conversations with me individually. But I want to hear what you're really looking for in this in this person. What's really important to you? What is the background? What are those what do you think the minimum qualifications should be? But most importantly, what are the personal characteristics they need to bring to be a fit here, to be a fit with the board? Do you want them to have, be more financially savvy? Do you, would you prefer that, that they have a treatment operator's license at some level? Do you prefer a PE? What are the things that you need? What are the 4 or 5 things you feel this person has to have to be successful here?
Yeah. So Director Martinson, what would you like to see?
Some of it I would prefer to talk in private, but generally what I've seen of this job, I compare it to things I've done in the past, around in the past. And the oil field operations are much more complicated than this. There's a lot more line miles, a lot more pumps, a lot more people. Things break a lot more often. This is, in some ways, it's almost a steady state process. So the thing I would value most of somebody, he has to have the engineering experience, the operations experience around process plant or a sewage plant. But more than that, to me, is the people. You've got to be able to work with the people and not be somebody that's going to ramrod things down people's throat, or if there's a policy they need to follow policy, not make individual, this guy gets this treatment, that guy gets that treatment kind of thing that goes on. So that's kind of hard to judge just from a resume, how you can tell, because I don't think it's legal for us to go into their personnel files from wherever they're currently working and just see what the employees reviewed, how employees reviewed the guy. We can't do that. He's not going to put that on his resume, I don't think.
However, our process includes very in-depth reference checks.
But the reference checks are probably not with current fellow employees, are they?
They are.
Can the employees actually talk to you about that without?
In these positions in public sector, for these positions, people do. And, as I said, we've been doing this for, many years. Our reference summaries are 7 or 8 pages long. You can tell the difference between an okay reference and one that's glowing.
And how do you check through just newspaper articles about?
Yes, we do all of that as well.
Jeff's successor showed up in the newspaper in his town 3 times as being a complete idiot or just wonderful kind of thing.
No, we do all of that.
Well, to me, again, those are the things that I would find the most valuable is when he has the experience with the plant, the process of some type. Doesn't necessarily have to be sewage plant, but that's very important, kind of a given. And, the people side of it is, to me, because it's such a small group, I've been around people that work in groups, companies of 10. It gets really nasty at times, if people are just, they're hard to get along with. There's a way to sort through all that and find someone that's, I don't want somebody that's just a pushover either, it's just, I remember, one family member was very pleased with the teacher he had because the teacher never made him do anything. And, we want somebody that has a drive and an ambition and good organizational skills, some forward thinking, planning for the future, what Jeff was trying to do right at the end with some of those studies he had commissioned. I thought that was very good. But again, the people issues, very, very important to me, that somebody that can survive in a small group environment without running everybody off. I'm done.
Dr. Kintosh?
I am completely flexible as to what kind of general manager we get. I'm a little bit befuddled thinking over my history. I'd like to recreate what we had with Jeff Palmer. One of the nice things about being on this board was that everything was taken care of. The staff reports were all well thought out. The options were considered and explained to us. And I never felt like I had to worry about something going wrong. And there are so many things that can go wrong in a sanitary district. You can have raw sewage going out to the ocean and bothering surfers, and people can have stuff locked up into their houses. All kinds of terrible things can go wrong. And I like having the feeling that everything's going to be taken care of and they're going to plan ahead. And our staff here does a remarkably good job of planning ahead as to what spare parts they need to have, what repairs they need to make today so that they don't have a major failure tomorrow. And I want to recreate that with our new general manager. He, to me, would be a plus, but it's not essential. So I'm completely flexible.
Dr. Bird?
I'll echo what Dr. Kintosh said. Jeff was an example of what I would be looking for. Someone that had military experience is a plus, in my opinion, but not requirement. The PE, I think, is important because in the case of Jeff, it gave him options. He would look at the choices based on his training. That's choice. Seemed like not much effort. So a PE me would be high on the list. The capability to talk to people without raising your voice, without getting excited, red-faced. Jeff was like that. He was pretty calm. Even when confronted in public, he was pretty good handling those situations. So that's an exceptional quality. I think the salary range we have to go in because of the cost of living here, probably at the same level where Jeff is being paid to attract someone. I'm the first one to mention salary. Anyway, that's it.
All right, my turn. Guess I echo what everybody else has to say. I really think engineering portion is probably important. I like somebody that's not afraid to talk to the public, is not afraid to go to real estate people and talk, is not afraid to talk in groups about things we do and the good things we do. Still has the humility to be able to go out and talk to these people in the yard, work through the problems with them. In an open door policy. I'm just looking for a good, honest person. I'm probably going to leave salary out of it for right now. Yeah. I think
I would agree on the general manager, preferably having an engineering background. I'm not sure that being a PE is a requirement because that's a very narrow kind of thing that slots you into civil or mechanical or electrical. I think that general manager here has to have a good understanding of complex systems and how to manage people that run complex systems. That's not a PE in any particular field. Obviously, working in a small organization is tougher from a personality point of view. But one thing, to echo what you said, I appreciated that Jeff was able to deal with the public, whether it was people coming in the front door with a complaint or it was local newspapers calling, say, what are you doing over there? That's the job of a CEO, is to handle the outside world as well as the inside, because we're going to have a combination CEO, COO here, really, as a general manager. I don't get calls from the outside world, so I don't think of board members as being the people that deal with the outside world on district matters, unless we give direction to the general manager to go in a particular way, then obviously expect that to be followed. The calm demeanor, absolutely essential. You start blowing up at people in a small organization, you're going to lose them, and you're going to lose chunks of your staff that you can't afford to lose all at one time. And it might take only one person be that chunk that you can't afford to lose. As far as the salary, I would look to you and say, what's going on in the coastal cities general manager ranks? And then think about it. Jeff did very well here. I was happy to endorse re-upping his contract every year with appropriate raises. I just don't know at this point what that number is going to be. So I'm going to look to you for some advice. Okay.
You're up, Robert.
I think I don't have really anything further to add. That's been pretty comprehensive. I mean, that's a really taken together. That's an ideal candidate. However, I would,
Except
for
for
my,
the Cape.
well, you know, the notion of CEO, COO starts to get things, and GM just starts, my mind starts getting confused. And I'm confused easily. I would just simply say a communicator, and that isn't the communication to the board and the communication to everyone else being different. That, in other words, congruity. That's it.
Add an addendum.
Sure.
Salary has been something that we haven't really talked about, really not as a board, but Jeff was, I think, when I looked at it on the state statistics, he was the fourth highest paid special district manager in 2 counties, Santa Barbara, Ventura. In terms of pay per employee, he was higher than everybody else by a factor of 4 to 8. That's just a metric I looked at. I'm not sure that's a good one, but just strikes me that the directors here suggested we start the new guy out at the same salary as Jeff has, which I would be opposed to unless he has as many years' experience as Jeff had, which they may. We don't know who we're going to find. This whole salary issues that needs some more, and you'll come to us with a range, depending on experience and all that. So, but at that point, it sounds like you're coming to us with a range, whether that's coming to you to arrange. So I think it's a two-way thing that we got to work out between you and our committee and come up with a range of what we might provide. And when you go out to flyers out, this is out that there's a job opening, do you put a salary range or an up to kind of comment?
Well, you can do either, but you have to have, per PERS, you have to have a number. They prefer that you show the range, but the reality is that some, there are some organizations that say we definitely won't hire beyond the midpoint, or for Iron House, we did up to, and they did get a PE, and they are hiring at that level. So that was 291 for, Central Valley, smaller district.
Central Valley.
Well, it's East Contra Costa County.
Since- Thanks. Follow-up. The subject of moving expenses came up last meeting, and my own experience is that can cost several $100,000 to move somebody. So how do you cover that in your notice of job availability? Do we have to tell you that we're going to cover those, or is that left to be just negotiated with?
It's usually left to negotiation. I will say that right now, most districts, cities, et cetera, are going up to about $20,000 for relocation.
20,000 to move?
Mhm.
My son, who came out of an apartment, nearly that much.
Right.
So
I
that's
mean,
not enough for a family.
it's not a huge amount. And, we are starting to see some, now special districts don't typically do it. We're starting to see some cities and counties again doing housing allowance type things. And, but since Bell, they had
So,
kind of gotten away from that, but.
so in your experience, is it better for an organization like us to have a set standard policy such that when a job opening comes up, all those things are part of the district's policy or whatever organization it is? Or is it better to just leave it open to negotiation?
Well, the reality is that this is your only employee other than, general counsel typically. And usually it's always up for negotiate. It's the only thing that, you can put it into policy and say, this is what we're going to do. But many of these actors are going to want to negotiate. And so usually, no matter what you might have in policy, they can come and say, well, I don't fall under your MOU or whatever collective bargaining agreements you have. And so they're going to oftentimes negotiate those things anyway. So, I mean, I try to, I don't want the candidates to get, for lack of a better term, I don't want them to be on the short end of the stick. You don't want them to come in feeling like and, we want to represent the district. We're going to tell you if we think, you probably should go ahead and pay for whatever thing they're asking for, or if we think it's really not what anybody is doing. I just did the executive director for SANDAG, which is San Diego Association of Governments. And we did it with no car allowance, which the previous ED had $1,000 a month car allowance, but they're an MPO. And so they don't like the look, the board doesn't like the look. And so we were able to, it's a much, much smaller package than the previous ED had. So
That's what
we look at all of those things and let you know, this is probably what you're going to have to pay.
And quality is going to be remembered long after the price is forgotten.
Oh, well, that's, yeah, exactly. That's why you look for somebody with great experience, and like Kentosh said, you want to recreate Jeff, which is hard to do. But I do think, though, that in terms of our thinking around budgets and all that, there needs to be some, I mean, salary is one thing because that goes on forever if they stay forever. But these one-time issues of moving and housing allowance, or those, I moved from Bakersfield to Santa Barbara. 1996 cost $22,000. So if they're offering 20 now, that's pathetic. It ain't gonna cut it. And so,
Cincinnati to Redondo Beach in 2003 was considerably above that.
yeah, and so we just need to be aware as a board that we didn't have a line item in the budget for general manager position, I'll say, and that could be easily 100,000 or more, without even stretching, I don't think. So anyway, thank you for letting us know about that.
Okay, we've completely muddled this schedule up now.
See what happens when you.
But we always say flexibility is the hallmark of.
How soon would you be able to meet the committee? Talk about salary in particular.
So I can send, so we can get the survey done by the end of the week. And I can send Allison next week. I don't have to travel at all next week.
Sounds like that's unusual.
That is unusual. Allison knows that she will always CC. So, and you'll be hearing from her at times. My associate recruiter is Fatima Nukic, and you'll get things from her. And it's always best to always CC her on everything just in case, because I can be on the road a lot. But the next week, I am available. I'm not traveling, so Wednesday is wide open, if that worked for you. I could do any time on Wednesday.
Thursday's 4th of July. So.
Wednesday is the 4th. I mean, Monday and Tuesday, I really am pretty open as well.
Once again, are we talking about a Zoom meeting?
Yes.
At 1 PM, 2 PM, 3 PM?
Whatever works for you. My day is open. So if, oftentimes if you meet in the evening, then we meet in the evening, but it seems like you do yours during late afternoon, so.
Well, only the things that are publicly noticed, we do that as a courtesy in case our staff want to attend. The ad hoc committee / subcommittee, whatever you want to call it, they can meet at their own mutual convenience with you. So that's entirely up to them.
I would say after 12 PM, afternoon, better for me than the mornings, which are really hectic. The afternoon's better. So
I'm good anytime, so the pleasure of the other two members. I move my schedule around pretty.
Afternoon of the 3rd, anytime on the 5th. I'll say after 1 o'clock. I'm going to get back from Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take Friday off. It's,
Allow you to do that?
I'm sure my phone will ring that I'll have to answer for someone.
Friday's the 5th.
Yes, Friday is the 5th.
I personally would like to see us get started done probably before the 4th. So
Yeah, maybe. The
Tuesday,
second a
Wednesday.
So I
possibility.
can, so Monday, any time, I'm open all afternoon. Tuesday, I'm open after 2. And Wednesday, I'm open all day.
Tuesday
Tuesday after 2.
after 2 is fun.
Okay.
Good. 7-2.
Sure. Director York, just a rather pointed question. If I knew what the minimum requirements are, do we have those posted somewhere?
Those are
In
what
other
you,
words, do any of us know what they are?
I mean, we have with the previous job description, but it's the board discretion to change those based on what you feel the needs are going forward. So the minimum
think we ought to
qualifications
have
are either at the advice of your consultant based on what the market generally requires, but each recruiting district, agency, et cetera, is going to have things that they find more important as far as strengths and weaknesses, and that's what defines that.
But at this point, this district doesn't have that piece of paper that says these are the.
know what Jeff was hired
Yeah,
against.
it was created at the time in which that recruitment was part of the actual recruitment processes for you to create that description.
15 years ago? Is that what we're saying?
That would be the one you would tweak to your satisfaction for this one. And I can definitely send that to her.
So, so this is kind of typical. So having just finished Iron House, we were looking for no less than 10 years of increasingly responsible management or administrative experience in a municipal or other public agency setting and experience working with an elected board of directors, a bachelor's degree in public or business administration, public policy, engineering, finance, or a field related to the work. A master's was highly desirable, and preferred was PE in the state. They were looking for a grade 5 operator certification. That was just because their current GM had a grade 5. I don't recommend that at all because that really makes your pull. I think we're looking for someone for San Jose, and I think it's down to 300 people in the entire state. Experience with, they have a membrane system, knowledge of the district's region, but those are the kind of typical things that.
Have a GM with a grade 5 operator's license. Tendency tell the plant operator who's a grade 4 what to do would be overwhelming.
Exactly. Yeah.
Would prefer someone who knows how to run an organization, has engineering experience, but not that specific.
No, I don't think it's necessary, and I wouldn't suggest using that. Some of the things I want to talk about, you talked about talking to, real estate, are they talking to developers? Do you have development going on? Do they need to be able to,
Absolutely.
good for them to have had, some land use type of experience and.
I get in trouble if I just talk, so I have to raise my.
Go ahead, Director Martin.
With what you just said, Director Quilisi, about having experience with more so than, do we feel we have to have somebody that's ever operated a plant that has any kind of a license or great rating? I know there's the first two, all those tiers, but
Yeah,
do we feel that they ever have to have even worked in a sewage plant before?
I would say no.
Because that opens up, because you're strictly looking at water districts or water related people, but he just said maybe we don't need to do that at all. Because Pepsi-Cola runs process, any number of oil fields run process. I don't know how broadly you want to let this go.
Oil fields aren't public agencies.
That's the key to public, to be a public agency.
I think so, because there's a whole different set of
Yes, there is.
limitations on what you can do and on what you have to do in the GM slot
And actually, how you can do
and how you can do it.
processes.
That's a key point, is that they have to have had, whatever their experience is, it has to have been in a public
I
setting.
think so. I'd like to echo Director Berg also. I would see military experience as a plus, not a requirement. There's a certain discipline there. And a comfort level with giving and taking orders, how to give orders, how to expect to see them carried out, that you don't necessarily find outside the military.
Well, and we definitely always do veteran advertising as well. It's important to us. And so, and obviously with the port here and, bases are small cities. There are people who are doing public works and CE on,
Navy bases here.
right, exactly. So, we've had many people that have come out of the military for these types of roles because they're small.
Director Martin.
Just as an add to that, type of operations that we do here at the water treatment, are probably most similar to kinds of things that go on ships.
we were to grade military experience, Navy in my life. I just because of, we had great success with operators from the Navy. They had that kind of plumbing and piping and electrical and all that kind of stuff. So
So we want a Navy guy.
you Navy?
Well, you know,
Every Air Force base and every Army base is a small city.
Well, that's true.
As a sanitary district,
And the CBs and the, what's the Army version of the
I'm from Wheatland, California.
Army Corps of Engineers?
I grew up with the SR flying over the top of my house, so that's where Beale is. So
it's pretty quiet.
these days it's pretty quiet, but
Favorite airplane by far.
brother lives in Wheatland.
no.
Dr. Bird, you work for the school district.
Pam, are you,
Steenberg? Name's Nick.
and were you going to contact the committee members directly with emails or?
Yes. So we'll get all of your contact information from Allison. The other thing is that for the rest of the board, Fatima will be reaching out to you so that you have our contact information. If you do want to have a personal conversation with us, we're happy to do that. And so she'll reach out to all of you for the committee to schedule our meeting and with the Zoom link for next week. And then for the rest of the board, if you want to have a conversation about additional things that you're looking for in the candidate. So then you'll have both of our contact information.
So that is our next step,
Tuesday afternoon.
Tuesday afternoon.
Together again.
Remotely.
We'll move on to pictures.
Can do it.
That,
And Pam, I'm happy with letting the committee take care of this, so I don't need to be on any
Okay.
calls or anything.
Okay.
I think that's the intent, right? Just 3 committee members meet this week? Yeah.
Can't be a quorum.
Mhm.
Can't be a quorum of the board,
Right, so it can be.
the subcommittee.
When does it become more important to have the entire board in?
So usually what happens is that the subcommittee does everything through the short list of candidates. So, we're going to put this out on the street. We're going to solicit candidates. Everyone will apply directly to CPS HR. We'll do comprehensive screening interviews with those candidates that meet the minimum qualifications. The subcommittee will get a report that includes the resumes of all of the candidates that we're screening right after it closed the final filing date. And then after the screening interviews are done, I'll send you a follow-up report that puts the candidates into a preferred group and a non-preferred group. But I'll do that just a couple of days before I meet with the 3 of you so that you can decide on the candidates, that we can discuss them. Sometimes there are things about interviews that we don't want to put in black and white, that we just want to have the conversation. And then you'll decide who you want to interview. And, at that point, looking at what the pool looks like as far as geographics and things, we may decide that you want to do your first round. And usually that's 5 to 6 candidates. And you may want to do that virtually, or if they're all in, if it's geographically,
Anyone's close by.
anyone that's close by, we can do that in person. But then you would identify a top 2 or 3 finalists. We move to reference checks, and then the full board interviews those finalist candidates.
really good with that
That was great.
as well. Okay,
Like the way this turned out.
with that, we'll move on to item 7. We've heard plenty of board member comments, so we have any general
Wait,
manager?
there's one. No, I'm kidding.
I have nothing.
Nothing. All right. Well, with that, we will be adjourned at 5:19.